In a walled ghetto at the heart of occupied Poland, a man buried the truth beneath the earth. They were fragments of celluloid, forbidden images dangerous enough to cost him his life. His name was Henryk Ross, officially photographer of the Łódź Ghetto, secretly guardian of memory. While the Nazis demanded propaganda portraits, Ross captured what they never wanted the world to see. Each click of the shutter was a death sentence if discovered, but he decided to risk everything, bearing thousands of photographs so that one day the world would know the truth. Henryk Ross was born in Warsaw in 1910 into an ordinary Jewish family. From an early age, he showed sensitivity to detail. The light reflected in windows, children running through courtyards, street vendors setting up their stalls. As a young man, he transformed this curiosity into a profession, working as a press photographer who captured everyday life with patience and respect. Everything changed in 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The war reduced Warsaw to ruins and turned Jews into statistics. In 1940, Henryk and his wife, Stefania, were deported to the Łódź Ghetto, the second largest in the country, where more than 160,000 people were crammed into a few square kilometers. Conditions were brutal: hunger, disease, freezing winters, and the constant shadow of death. For many, survival meant silence. For Ross, it meant finding a way to bear witness. Inside the ghetto, Ross's talent was quickly noticed. He was appointed official photographer for the Jewish Council under Chaim Rimkowski. On the surface, it seemed like a privilege. While others were sent to exhausting labor, Ross was given a camera and assignments. But the work was a curse. His orders were to produce identification photos, record productivity, and most of all, create propaganda. The Nazis wanted images that showed the ghetto as useful. Workshops humming, women smiling at sewing machines, children neatly lined up, carefully staged lies. Ross complied outwardly, but behind the lens, he saw the truth. Children collapsed after posing. Women smiled only to return to rooms where their loved ones starved. Men's eyes begged silently if the photographs would save them. At night, tormented, he confessed to Stefania, "I'm photographing ghosts. They make me record lies while the truth dies outside the frame." She answered quietly, "Then find a way to record the truth." That became his secret oath. With his official position granting limited access, Ross began a second hidden mission. Whenever possible, he photographed in secret. His camera, tucked beneath his coat, became a weapon against oblivion. He captured deportations, families pushed into trucks, children clinging to their mothers, the elderly stumbling toward an unknown fate. He photographed hunger, figures collapsed in the snow, girls chewing on potato peels. Yet he also recorded fragile traces of life, weddings performed in bare rooms, children laughing with makeshift toys, candles lit quietly for the Sabbath. Stefania became his lookout and accomplice. While Ross clicked the shutter, she hid film rolls in cracks and watched for patrols. Together, they built a rhythm of silent resistance. Every photograph was a gamble. Many who kept diaries or secret notes vanished overnight. Ross knew discovery would mean execution, but he could not stop. For him, every frame was proof, every image a cry against erasure. Night in the ghetto was filled with coughs, footsteps, and muffled cries. In that darkness, Ross and Stefania whispered promises to each other. "If they kill me, the film will live," Ross said. "Then live, and make sure it survives," Stefania replied. Fear was constant. A suspicious glance from a guard, a neighbor's careless word could end everything, yet love and determination steadied them. In their cramped room, they clung not just to each other, but to the idea that even if they perished, their images would one day speak. For Ross, silence was unbearable. Fear was heavy, but forgetting would be worse. By 1944, the ghetto was collapsing. Deportations accelerated, and Ross knew the end was near. He and a few trusted friends gathered thousands of negatives. They packed them into metal boxes and glass jars, sealing them as best they could. One night, they dug a pit in secret. Ross lowered the boxes into the ground and whispered, "If my voice is silenced, may you speak." Covering them with earth, he felt he was planting memory itself. Perhaps the soil would rot the film. Perhaps no one would ever find it. But perhaps, just perhaps, the images would outlive both him and his captors. That act was not despair, but defiance. It was a refusal to let the truth be buried with the bodies. In January 1945, silence fell over the ghetto. The Nazis had fled, leaving behind ruins and the few who had survived. Liberation had come, but survival was not victory. When the Red Army entered, Ross, frail and starving, had only one thought: the buried box. With trembling hands, he dug into the frozen earth until the rusted metal appeared. Opening it, he feared the worst. Many negatives were ruined, blurred by moisture, but hundreds had survived. Against the pale winter light, faces emerged. A boy in shoes too large, eyes far older than his years. A woman clutching a loaf of bread, children huddled together for warmth. Ross wept. The ghetto was gone, but its memory had endured. The fragile strips of celluloid were now more than photographs. They were evidence. For Ross, liberation was not the end of his duty. Years later, history called him once again, this time in a courtroom. In Israel, Ross was summoned to testify at the trial of Adolf Eichmann in 1961. Before judges, lawyers, and a worldwide audience, he presented his photographs. The courtroom fell silent as the images appeared. Children with hollow eyes, families herded toward trains, men and women bent under hunger. Statistics became faces, numbers became lives. Ross explained how he had been forced to create Nazi propaganda, yet secretly risked everything to capture the truth. He described the burial of the boxes and the miracle of their recovery. His testimony was not polished rhetoric. It was raw evidence. Each frame undermined denial. Each face condemned the machinery of death. After the war, Ross carried not only the surviving negatives, but also the weight of those who never returned. He and Stefania eventually emigrated to Israel, where life moved forward, yet the past clung to them like a shadow. In Tel Aviv, Ross worked modest jobs, rarely speaking of what he had seen. The box of photographs remained in his care, wrapped carefully as though it were still buried. At times, he would open it, staring at the faces, whispering names he did not know. For him, the archive was both triumph and torment, proof that he had saved memory and a reminder of the lives that memory could never restore. Friends recalled that he was quiet, reserved, often lost in thought. When pressed, he would say simply, "These are not my pictures. They belong to those who are gone." Stefania, ever his partner, reminded him that survival was not enough, that testimony was also a duty. In the early years of Israel, when many survivors struggled to speak of their experiences, Ross remained reluctant. He feared that the photographs, so raw, might not be understood, but history had a way of calling him back. As the years passed, deniers emerged, and the world needed proof. Slowly, Ross realized that the negatives he had hidden in the soil of Łódź were now his responsibility to bring into the light. Ross lived until 1991, long enough to see his buried images cross oceans and generations. Exhibitions in Israel, Europe, and North America displayed his work under the title Memory Unearthed. Visitors walked slowly through dimly lit galleries, their silence broken only by the sound of footsteps on the floor. They looked into the eyes of children who had long since perished, into the worn faces of women and men who had endured humiliation and hunger. For survivors, the photographs were mirrors of a life stolen yet preserved. Some recognized neighbors or distant relatives. Others wept at the possibility of seeing themselves as children, unaware that someone had once captured their struggle. Teachers brought students to these exhibitions, guiding them gently from frame to frame, explaining that history is not only books and numbers, but faces and names. Historians recognized in Ross's archive something rare, images made not by liberators or propagandists, but by a victim who had lived inside the ghetto. His photographs blurred the line between documentation and resistance. They proved that even under oppression, the human spirit sought ways to speak. In Toronto, decades later, a major exhibition drew thousands. A visitor wrote in the guest book, "These pictures are not of the past. They are warnings for the present." Another added, "I will carry these faces with me." Ross had once feared the negatives might rot in the soil. Instead, they became seeds of memory. From them grew testimony, awareness, and a renewed call to resist forgetting. Each print pulled from the archive became not just evidence of Nazi crimes, but a gift to future generations, proof that even when surrounded by death, one man chose to preserve life in images. Until his final years, Stefania remained by his side, the same quiet strength that had once stood guard while he clicked the shutter. In the end, Henryk Ross did what armies could not. He defeated silence. With a fragile camera and the courage to risk everything, he ensured that memory would not be buried with the bodies. His photographs remind us that behind every statistic lies a story, behind every number a face. Today, when denial still lurks and indifference tempts us to look away, Ross's buried archive calls us back. It asks us to remember, to bear witness, and to pass the truth forward. If this story moved you, let it not end here. Share it, speak about it, and join us at Voices from the Camps, where memory becomes resistance and stories of courage rise again to be heard, because forgetting is never an option.